We're going to be talking about something a little bit different on this episode of the show. Now, we're going to be talking about body dysmorphia. Now, what I wanted to say right up front, right off the bat, is I'm no expert. I'm not giving you any specific advice. I am in no position to give you any specific advice on this. These are just my own thoughts and experiences, and they don't replace those of any sort of medical professional, a counselor, or anything like that. This is just what's come from my experience, and maybe how I've dealt with it is completely the wrong way, but maybe understanding some of my story helps you out a little bit. So I don't want you to misconstrue this as me telling you this is what you should do. It might be the worst advice in the world. I'm just sharing my experiences. And this came from a post I put on Instagram a week or so ago. And somebody asked me in the comments if I would do a podcast to talk more about this specific subject. And I kind of sat there and went, maybe not. Because I didn't feel comfortable being a seemingly voice of authority on this subject when I absolutely am not. So that whole thing of stay in your lane was really kind of ringing true in my mind, is like, should I just avoid this subject or not? So I've decided to do this episode literally just about my experiences. And if that helps you, then cool. Like I said, it's not meant as any form of specific advice though. So my body image issues started really when I was back at school. So I was a fat kid at school. I was the last one who was going to get picked for sports. So like football, shit like that. And when I look back on photos of me in primary school, so I don't know what that is in the US, but primary school, so I was 10 or 11, something like that. In my football kit, standing next to two of my friends, is I had legs like fucking tree trunks. So the quads and the calves were the same thickness. It was just like one solid slab of leg fat. And at the time, I don't think you realize how powerful years of negative reinforcement is on your future self, how you think about yourself in the future. So when I was 10, 11, I had issues with my weight, but it wasn't until I got to secondary school when I was, 12, that really kind of escalated into terms of a bit more kind of like teasing, bullying, that type of thing, specifically about the way I looked and all those sorts of things. So that was a real shock to my system when I got into my teenage years and kind of carried out through that period of time that, okay, now I'm having this kind of drilled into me that the way I look is wrong. The way I look is not how a human being should look. You shouldn't have this level of body fat. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that. And you shouldn't definitely look like that fucking dude there, that little fat chubby kid. So that negative reinforcement obviously affected me at the time. It affected how I felt about myself. It affected how I thought, how I acted, how I interacted with other people, or completely avoided other people, as was the case. Now, what I didn't realize is that fast forward 20 years and those negative reinforcements still affect me now and probably have done for a long time. Obviously, much less these days, but it's still been a case that those feelings and those thoughts have been there. So even when my body started to change, I couldn't really see that for what it was from the outside. So I'd gone from, I'd say, I'm just throwing out some rough years now, maybe when I was 18-ish, then I started to find the gym and things like that. I started to lose some weight and kind of not necessarily got in great shape, but certainly kind of started to change my body image. But I was again very, very dissatisfied with what I was seeing in the mirror. Now you could ask, obviously if you ask my parents, they'd say, oh, I look fantastic and stuff like that. But that's parents, that's their job. So I felt very self-conscious. I felt not very confident at all in public situations. I still don't to this day. So you might think that's a bit weird that I sit in front of a camera, a microphone, create podcasts, social media, live videos, all sorts of stuff. But actually in social environments, I'm very, very much a, let's say, introverted recluse. I'm at the back of the room. So I'm not mingling with anybody. Anyway, so my focus was always on something negative. It was a case of I missed this sort of like bigger picture. I was thinking like when I looked in the mirror, I would zero in on what I thought was the worst thing, whether that was I was too fat around the stomach. So I would miss every possible piece of progress that I'd ever made. So when I started to go into the gym, I built muscle. I, looked in fairly decent shape, but all I could zero in on was how much belly fat I had. And that was where I just kind of thought to myself that I'm still this fat kid. I'm still this fat kid, but I'm now in a 25-year-old body. But I'm just still this fat kid who can't shift this weight. And then it's a case of I felt like everybody else around me at the time, although I didn't socialize or anything like that with the kids that I was with in high school, in school, is that I was completely different set of people. But I felt like those people had the same thoughts. They were still judging me the way that those people judged me back at school, when I can absolutely guarantee you could ask any one of them and they didn't think that in the slightest. But in my mind, the world thinks that of me, regardless of person, is the world thinks that of me. And that's what sort of really kind of made me think, well, until I reach this ideal of what people want, then I'm always going to be, there's always going to be something negative, or there's going to be something wrong. That's kind of how I felt about it. I never found that like true happiness, because I have to say, I really didn't know what true happiness meant to me in terms of body image or anything like that. So my happiness with my body and my body image was driven by this external ideal. It was driven by other people's views, or my perception of other people's views. It wasn't driven by an internal feeling to say, okay, I want to, this is what makes me happy and this is what makes me feel good about myself. It was, okay, this is what I have to look like in order to feel good about myself. It was this external drive that was being forced upon me, and therefore that's what I was comparing myself against to. So that's the whole sort of where, I guess, how I look at myself in the mirror. That's kind of the origins of all of those sorts of things. And I feel like when I then started to get into fitness and all that sort of stuff, putting myself out there in a freaking half naked, as you do these days, Instagram, it's very nerve-wracking, and it caused me anxiety. And the thing about the post that I put on was literally the most shredded I've ever been. Veins popping out everywhere. You could see every single muscle. But literally on the day of that photo shoot, I looked down at my stomach and looked in the mirror, and I was pinching fat. And even though, like looking back, my skin was freaking paper thin, is that I felt that I was too fat, because that negative reinforcement is that I don't necessarily see what other people see. And I'm no like medical dude. I couldn't tell you why I feel like that. I couldn't tell you what's the reason, the rationale for thinking like that. I just don't know, but it is there. So the logical thing is, well, how do you get over that sort of thing? How do you get past that? And the honest answer is, I do not fucking know. I have no clue how you get over it. So those thoughts are still with me now. So at the moment, I'm putting on muscle. I'm in a surplus. I have more body fat than I'm used to having, but I'm kind of okay with that. I'm not, I look in the mirror and say, okay, you've got a little bit more body fat than you want. But someone, again, like externally looking at me will say, you look fucking fantastic. But to me, in my mind, is that I'm carrying a little bit too much body fat. But it's definitely not to the extent as how I thought about myself in the past. So I guess it's all driven by your perception, or my perception, of what other people think. So maybe until you think that until you lose that little bit of body fat that you're not going to be happy. But I think that really it's a case of until you lose the fact that your happiness isn't driven by those external perceptions, until you get rid of that notion, then any change you make isn't going to be enough. There's always going to be something that falls short. So you have to kind of get out of that mindset that these external perceptions of what I should look like, of how I'm going to drive things, is that until you get rid of that, then I don't think you're going to get anywhere. So I guess I guess I'm continually working on trying to be satisfied with the way I look. And, that's not worrying about the future. That's not necessarily worrying about like what I used to look like or anything like that. But I'm trying to live in the moment. So I enjoy the process of working out. I enjoy fucking eating. So there you go. So I enjoy working out. I enjoy having good workouts. I enjoy socializing and I enjoy eating out and all those different sorts of things. So now for me, I'm in a much happier position because I'm finding things and finding my way through into what things I'm actually enjoying in life and what actually makes me happy in life. And I'm not stuck in this whole thing of, okay, it's driven by what other people think of my level of body fat. That's not what's driving my happiness anymore. Yes, I might look in the mirror and say, some days, I know what, you're too fat, son. Come on, lose some weight. And actually, that's probably not the case. I'm not necessarily overweight by any stretch of the imagination, but those things do pop into your mind every now and again. So, like I said at the start of this episode of the show, I'm no expert. I'm really just fumbling my way through freaking life in general, aren't we all? And with this sort of stuff, it's no one teaches you how to handle it unless you go and see a professional. So for me, I've just kind of muddled my way through the whole thing. And I still get those feelings of I'm that fat kid at school and all those different sorts of things. And I kind of would shy away from wearing certain type of clothing, or I'd shy away from, going swimming or whatever and stuff like that. And that would still be the case now. And those things, whether they do ever completely change, let's hope they do. And maybe with the right advice and the right support, they can. But for me, I think that I'm in a hugely better situation than I am right now. And again, it's for me, what's worked for me is focusing in on more things than just the way I look, as my world doesn't revolve around the way I look, especially doesn't revolve around the level of body fat that I'm carrying. And I think that making that switch, that mindset switch, has really enabled me to think a lot less about this sort of stuff. So, like I said, I'm not giving you any advice. I'm not giving you any guidance or anything like that. But hopefully, maybe it sort of resonated with you and you took something from it.